The coup in Gabon has attracted a lot of condemnation. The United Nations has condemned it. The African Union has also condemned it, as well as France. Now, military leaders appointed Army General Brice Nguema as the transitional leader. His troops carried him triumphantly through the streets of the capital, Libreville. The deposed President Ali Bongo is under house arrest, and his government has been dissolved. He's appealing to his people to rise up, but his arrest on Wednesday sparked jubilation across the country. The Bongo family has run the oil-rich Central African country for 55 years. In the meantime, the African Union's Peace and Security Council said Thursday it had decided to immediately suspend Gabon following the military coup this week. For Bon This, I'm joined now by I think pretty much later Osita Chiruka will be joining me, but for now I'm going straight to Lagos studio where Professor Efem Ubi, the Acting Director of Research and Studies at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, will join me. Professor Ubi, good to see you and thanks for your time. Quickly, let's start off by talking about the developing stories here. First, it was Niger. Looks like he's having... Well, Professor Obi, can you hear me?
I can't hear you properly. It's breaking.
I'll have to come back to you. Well, we'll give you a minute, and we'll get that sorted out, and we'll come back. So quickly, we're trying to look at issues happening across the continent, specifically the issue that is happening in Gabon. Keep in mind, just as the continent was actually trying to understand the reasons behind the coup in the Niger Republic, as ECHO was also trying to find a resolution to that. The continent woke up to another big bang in Central Africa, where in Gabon there's been some kind of military takeover. The world is watching closely, and experts have been trying to understand the kind of democracy that these African countries have had, and while the people would go all out there and rejoice once the soldiers took over. We'll give you a sense of what's happening. That's the release from the chairperson of the African Union Commission on the situation in Gabon, which came out today, whereby specifically it says, if you go through the second paragraph, it strongly recalls that that it constitutes what's happened there, flagrant violation of the legal and political instruments of the African Union, including the African Charter on Elections, Democracy and Governance. We've had a series of experts speak to us here on Arise Prime Time, and some of the experts have also had to speak about the democratic principles that are almost absent. Let me come back to Professor Ubi again. Professor Ubi, I'm hoping that it's better this time. If you can hear me, once again, welcome and thanks for being on Arise Prime Time. Let's quickly understand what we're dealing with at the moment, specifically in Gabon.
Thank you for having me on your news night. As a matter of fact, it's a very sad situation we find ourselves in Africa at this particular moment. With the raging coups across West Africa and some part of Central Africa, like Gabon has shown. We are dealing with a whole lot now. I think what it is actually showing and portraying to the international community is that liberal democracy is actually retrogressing in Africa. And in that state, I think we have to do something urgently. We have to look for solution urgently, and the most important aspect of the solution should be the root cause of why the military is coming back into politics, at this time. And so a lot of factors have come into play that brings about the military purchase into governance, which includes weak economic base. And like I said, if any place you have weak economic base, there's an imminent revolt from the bottom, if care is not taken. Issues of sit-tight presidents and permanent presidents which has always been the problem of Africa. And, you know, some people are saying that these are democratic monarchies, you know. And so I think a whole lot of issues coupled with corruption that is endemic in many African societies. I think these are some of the reasons, aside many others, that are bringing back the military. You know, and you know, with the celebration across these countries where the military has taken over, it shows that the people themselves too are not happy with the situation. They are not happy with democracy. Invariably, democracy has not delivered gains, you know, for the people. You know, the whole essence for which they yearned for democracy in the 90s, you know, the third wave of democracy, is actually not bringing back benefit. And so once these benefits are not there, the people get frustrated. And once frustration sets in, you know, there's this call for different aspect of unconstitutional change of government, which could include social revolution, military purchase, as well as rebellion. And so I think we need an urgent solution to this military comeback in Africa.
Well, Professor Obi, you're speaking of solutions, but it doesn't look like that's what some of these African leaders are already talking about. I mean, look at Rwanda and Cameroon. They started to reshuffle their military top brass just after the coup in Gabon. More a case of treating the symptom instead of the cause, which you highlighted. Is it difficult an understanding for these leaders?
Well, I wouldn't subscribe to the fact that the reshuffling of the military is actually the answer. And like I said, you see, we need to treat this, the root cause and not the symptoms. I think what we are seeing right now is about trying to cop the symptoms instead of treating the root cause. And the root causes are those things I've mentioned: maladministration, leadership ineptitude, sit-tight presidency, permanent presidency, if I may call it that way, extreme poverty, insecurity, a failure of liberal democracy to deliver in various aspects, poor governance, and a whole lot of other challenges, which include even the environmental challenges in many parts of this, in many parts of Africa, or Africa as a whole. And so if we're able to target these root causes and try to start looking for solutions. You know, solutions are not magic. They don't just come. You know, there should be a transcendental progression towards curbing these issues. If we are able to do that, I think the next couple of years we will see the sustenance and consolidation of democracy. I have argued, you know, much recently on the fact that, you see, if these issues are not taken into consideration and solutions begin from that perspective, from the root cause, I think we are going to see an African where, you know, in the not so distant future, 1/3 of Africa will be overtaken by the military, you know, or either way, unconstitutional changes of government might take place, you know. And so I think it is high time we look at those solutions. We shouldn't be treating the symptoms. So the changing of military hierarchy or reshuffling of the military hierarchy, like what has happened in Cameroon and in Rwanda, is not the solution. The solution is the people. The solution is economic growth for the nation. The solution is create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive, build the enabling infrastructure, productive infrastructure, and not social infrastructure like what we are seeing around. Build productive infrastructure, health, education, as well as put in place necessary economic policies that could enliven the people. And if that is not there, you know, we will still continue to have military purchase, unconstitutional change of government in 1/3 of Africa in the not so distant future. And so these are the things we should look into right now.
You've actually set this standard for the African Union, specifically looking at what is happening around the East African region and the Central African region. Democracy, let's come back to democracy and the sit-tight rulers that we have seen on the continent. Cameroon is one of such, and a few others that have also tweaked their constitution. How does this resonate with the people who ordinarily would think that that's a kind of democracy that they want?
Well, democracy is not a one-size-fits-all. And so in recent times, we have advocated for a form of democracy that will fit into the social structural dynamics of many African countries. You know, I think what the problem with democracy or liberal democracy is the fact that, you see, many of our leaders actually adopt liberal democracy and implement hook, line, and sinker. You know, I have always argued, you see, you cannot try to fuse an alien practice into a system, you know, because when you try to do that, the adverse effect is what we see, like the chaos, the crisis, the imminent revolt from the bottom that we witness across Africa. And so I think it is high time, like I have argued, we should look at other climes, other developing countries or emerging economies and others. How have they been able to get to the point they are, you know, and why is it that you don't have military purchase in those countries or unconstitutional changes of government in those countries? So why can't we look into these countries and see and look at their path to development or modernization? We can learn a few from their modernization part, and we can also adopt it into our own system and adapt it, you know, and see. We try to create an alternative development path for many of our countries. And if we're able to do that, I think most of these problems will be lessened. You know, whether we like it or not, development is a transcendental progression. It's not something that is instantaneous. You know, even the developed countries are actually still developing. So development itself is a process. And so we need to start from now to define our own kind of development. You know, look at our development part. You know, over the years, we've made to believe that statistics actually, GDP growth is actually development. But you see, that is just an aspect of growth, economic growth. You know, if you look at over the last couple of years, the last decade, since the turn of the millennium, you know, with the whole story about African economic renaissance, you know, within 10 or 12 years period, there was a total regression economically. A lot of countries fell into recession. Many countries in Africa have fell into recession twice. So if you're talking about economic growth, that means that growth wasn't sustained. That growth did not translate into HDI, you know, Human Development Index. And so a whole lot of countries crumbled economically. And so we should begin to think of how our economic growth, our resources that we have in Africa could be put into proper use that will add value addition to the domestic economy. And so, you know, if we begin to look at all these ways, you know, to enliven the domestic economy, to give impetus to the domestic economy and put in place proper enabling environment, proper policies, put in reforms that could inject, you know, epitome of growth, I think we will begin to have a bit of you know, progress in the continent. And I would like to add this. You see, development is actually what sustains democracy. Development guarantees democracy, but the reverse is not the case. You know, there's this argument, you know, over the years that when you are democratic, when you practice democracy, it will bring about development. But I found out that, you know, with what is happening now, the reverse is the case. It is development that actually sustain and consolidate on democracy. And so I think that should be where we begin to look for the treatment of unconstitutional change of government, put in place proper policies, proper mood of implementations that could create that enabling environment for economic growth and development to thrive. And I think we'll begin to see results. Now, aside the economic aspect, insecurity is a huge problem, especially in West Africa and the Sahel. Now, if you look at 1960s, from the 1960s, when at the early days of independence, when military purchase, you know, started, you know, look at the speeches of all the military governments, during takeover. They all sound the same, even up to the last one. But there's a difference, a very slight difference, in the military coup speeches that we have read the last few months and a few years since 2020. All of them are talking about insecurity, especially insecurity emanating from terrorism and insurgency and a whole host of criminalities, around the Sahel and many countries within the region. And so insecurity too should be looked into. How do we manage insecurity? How do we find solutions to the insecurity in West Africa, in the Sahel, and across Africa? And now this is where I begin to think about that. You see, leadership should preempt. That's what I come up with, and I call preemptive peace and security approach. You have to preempt peace. You have to preempt security. What that means is you have to be anticipatory. Put in place the right framework. Put in place the right indicators that could safeguard nations, that could, help nations fight against insecurity. If you put in place proper economic policies, you put in place the enabling infrastructure, you put in place policies that will enhance governance, leadership, create employment, I think we might begin to have less of military coups that we are experiencing in recent times.
I'll come back to you. Let me quickly bring in Professor Chidi Odinkalu to join this conversation. And he's a lawyer and former chairman of the National Human Rights Commission. Professor Odinkalu, good to see you. The good thing is that you once served as an advisor to the AU. Now we're looking at all of this, and people are trying to hazard a guess, trying to understand what's happening. Look at Gabon, a population of 2.5 million people that produces about 182 million barrels of crude daily, but poor. And this is what we're getting. What is it that is so hard for the leaders of the AU to understand about true governance for the people? So Odinkalu, it doesn't look like he can hear me because he's actually looking away. We seem to be having some issue with that. We'll reconnect with Chidi Odinkalu, and I come back to you, Professor Ubi. Professor Ubi, I was trying to bring in Odinkalu to this conversation. Now let's talk about the resources which you also spoke about. You've actually gotten into another very touchy aspect that many Africans are trying to understand. Now we're talking about Gabon now. Less than 3 million in population, but its resources are, in overwhelming proportion, yet a poor country.
Well, I think it's not just Gabon that is suffering from its inability to benefit from its resources. I think many countries in Africa are also having the same problem. I think the whole issue has been the fact that we've not been able to manage the resources we have in Africa for the common good of the people. Now, it's a paradox where, you see a country so rich like Gabon. Gabon has their resources are manganese, I think magnesium, crude oil, and it's a country that produces about 181,000 crude oil every barrel every day. And you still find nearly half of the population in acute poverty. It's a paradox. And I think this is all about corruption and the mismanagement of our resources. That is why in many of my discussion, I look at, one area that the government of African countries should put more effort should be in the area of science and tech. It should be in the area of industrialization. You see, we need to start creating a manufacturing society, an industrialized society. We need to start creating scientists that could actually be able to mine our resources, produce or manufacture from this, finished goods from the resources we have. I think the problem is because we are unindustrialized, we are not manufacturing, we are very unscientific, lack of technology, and with all that, you don't expect to gain from your resources because all you sell is commodity. All you sell is the raw materials. Like I started with the fact that at the turn of the millennium, there was a whole lot of growth in Africa. A lot of countries, including Nigeria, were growing at between 5 and 7% until in 2014, when a lot of countries actually went into recession. The question you ask is, why did these countries go into recession? It's because it was a commodity-based economy. And the moment the commodity market crashed, the economy melted. Everything started disappearing. All the gains of, say, the first decade of the millennium started drifting away. And we all fell back into recession. Some countries went into recession twice. And now a lot of countries, COVID-19 came in 2020, again destroyed the economy globally, not just Africa. Now, a lot of countries fell into minus 1, 0, minus 1, minus 2, minus 3 GDP growth rate and all that. And so I think, you see, we should learn from experience. I think part of the problem is that we are not actually learning from our experience, our historical experience, And, a country or countries that don't annex their development to their history, to their culture, to their tradition, and a whole lot of other indicators of the society will never develop. Look at all the Asian tigers, and look at even the advanced economy, the developed economies. You find out that their development has a history or has an attachment to their history, has an attachment to their culture. In short, they have an identity that, that actually moderate and guide their development. Then we should have proper policies. For instance, let me give you an example. I've spent some few years in China. And, when you go to China, you see all the companies, for instance, the car companies, Mercedes, Volkswagen, BMW, they don't set up assembly plant in China. They set up the manufacturing plant because they don't allow that. You see, here the government will come. I mean, these companies will come. They will only set up an assembly plant. And the worst of them all is where they come to just mine the raw materials and take it out, produce the finished goods, and bring back these goods for us to buy at an exorbitant price. And so in that case, how can you develop?
But let me jump in here.
You can't develop without science. You can't develop without technology.
Let me come in here. And what you've highlighted, so for some Africans, they say, number one, we're not in want of plans or programs. But again, the thing is about, you spoke about a culture that over the years, some of these African countries have developed a culture of pillage, a culture of thievery, a culture whereby a culture of greed. So how can we reverse all of this? Because I see the smile on your face. A culture of greed to the extent that what is meant for an entire generation is being taken by an individual or a family. So if you're talking about Asians, the whole thing about greed is almost absent owing to the kind of laws they have put in place. What's more for Africa to do to ensure that we can actually strengthen our laws as a deterrent to any would-be leader who's coming to steal?
Well, like you said, we have to strengthen our law. But I think the answer is simple and straightforward. We don't have patriotic citizens in many countries of Africa. We don't have nationalist citizens, nationalists. We don't have people who have the love of country. Because if you have the love of country, you cannot steal wealth that is meant for the common good, that is meant for everybody. I think we need to create patriotic citizens. We need to create nationalistic citizens. And aside that, we have to put in place the laws that will sanction, if you're involved in such issues of corruption, high-level corruption. You have to put in place those laws, except we start punishing people, who are involved in corruption. I think, we will not make any headway. And so, but the most important thing, we need to rearrange our psychology. I mean, rearranging it is to let the citizens know that they have to be patriotic to the nation, that what is meant for the nation is meant for everybody and not for just a single individual and their family. Look at the Gabonese case, where the whole issue of discourse has been that one family has ruled for about 56 years, 57 years. The whole discourse today in the social media and everywhere is the fact that so much wealth has been accumulated by just a single family, including children, and all that. You say, why should that be the talk of the day in Africa? Some countries in Africa are like, they became independent some 50 years ago, some 60 years ago, and some 62 years ago, and look at where we are. I just wrote an article which is titled Africa's Progress of Shame and the Resurgence of Military Coups. You see, because what has been right from the days of independence, it has not really changed. We need to change our mentality. We need to change our orientation. We need to have love of country. We need to be nationalistic. We need to be patriotic. And that is the only solution, aside other solutions that will come up in respect of different other areas that we are not doing well. We have to create jobs. We have to do away with maladministration, leadership mismanagement, leadership ineptitude, and all that. And aside that, the most important thing is try to fashion out a system of government or a democratic system of government that is in tune, that is in line with local peculiarities, not just what you see practice in other climes, in other advanced climes, and you now bring it here and you implement it hook, line, and sinker. You see, it's never going to work. Just like you fusing two atoms, you try to fuse atoms, and they are repelling. When you use force to fuse it, you have that catastrophic effect. That's the same way atomic bomb was produced. So because you're trying to force those atoms. The same way when you try to force an alien practice, it will never work. It's going to create chaos. It's going to create disorder. And so we need to fashion out laws. We need to fashion out policies that will create better society for African countries.
Professor Efem, we would like to thank you for your time.